So, is it possible that the federal income tax is about to be eliminated? Every decade or so, this topic gets dusted off, but in the last few weeks, it's come roaring back. And in a cabinet meeting just earlier this week, President Trump said something that, if we take it literally, it would completely rewrite the entire tax system. This is what he said. At some point in the not too distant future, you won't even have income tax to pay because the money we're taking in is so great, is so enormous that you're not going to have income tax to pay. Whether you get rid of it or just keep it around for fun or have it really low, much lower than it is now, but you won't be paying income tax. Now, there's also been some references to making income tax-free for anyone under 150,000 and this proposal to just completely eliminating it. There's been the $2,000 dividend that's been talked about, and I don't want to go into all of that today. I just want to talk about the very basics of the federal income tax system and how we can replace that. I want to do this, though, before the clickbait crowd turns this into a circus. So, here's a few of the facts. Now, before we go any further, I do want to address something here. Some of you are, I'll say this nicely, politically sensitive, and you might get irritated any time what you construe as politics shows up in a discussion that's supposed to be about retirement planning. Let's not pretend politics doesn't matter here. The policies that come out of Washington have a huge impact on your retirement. I mean, think about the One Big Bill Act back during President Biden's term with the repeal of the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. Those were not minor tweaks. They changed people's income in a really meaningful way. So, yeah, this stuff matters. And no, we can't do anything about it before it becomes law. But being aware of what's potentially coming does help you make better decisions about the future. And that's why we're talking about it today. All right, let's clarify what's actually being proposed here. So, President Trump has floated a couple of different tax overhaul ideas. One version eliminates the federal income tax entirely, or at least for people under a certain income level. And then another idea involved sending out these $2,000 dividend checks that would supposedly be funded by revenue from tariffs. Now, to be completely fair, some Treasury officials have softened that up or at least reframed pieces of those proposals in some follow-up comments. But the messaging is out there. People are hearing it, and it's raising a whole lot of questions. So, let's zoom out for a second and look at the big picture, how the federal government actually gets its money. In the fiscal year that just closed, the federal government collected about $5.2 trillion in total revenue. So 2.6 trillion, that's about half, came from individual income taxes. The rest came from payroll taxes, corporate income taxes, and several smaller sources. But as part of that 5.2 trillion, about 260 billion came in through tariffs. So that gives us a rough picture of the gap between what's currently coming in income taxes versus tariffs. So roughly 2.6 trillion is coming in federal income taxes, 260 billion, about 10%, is coming in through tariffs. And as much as I would love to see federal income taxes go away, I've got to admit at first glance, I can't make the simple math work. I don't see how you replace 2.6 trillion with roughly 260 billion. Unless you crank tariffs up to the point where they're 10 times higher than they are now and imports somehow hold steady. If you did that, you'd at least see much higher consumer prices, which would effectively mean you swapped an income tax system for a big national consumption tax. But look, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm no economist. There are lots of ripple effects that when you make changes to tax policy, you just can't predict them. Just a simple example here. Just suppose that a couple who's married filing jointly has about $150,000 in taxable income. They're going to pay somewhere around $22,000 in federal income tax, give or take a few dollars. So, if you eliminate that tax, they suddenly have a lot more buying power. That extra $22,000 could absolutely help them absorb higher prices that show up because of the tariffs. So, if you really did a clean one-to-one trade-off, Where income taxes disappear and tariffs fill the gap, people would have more cash in their pockets to deal with some price increases. And remember, not everything people buy is imported. Domestic goods wouldn't face tariffs at all, and that changes the mix. And then you get into the second order effects. Importers don't like paying those tariffs. Some of them may just move production to the United States, and that creates jobs here, which sounds great, but it also means fewer imports to tax, and less imports means less tariff revenue. So, the very thing that's good for American workers could undercut the money you were counting on to replace the income tax. Dear Lord, that's why economics can feel like a big giant game of dominoes. You tip one over and two others fall in directions that you didn't expect. And that's why I get really skeptical when I hear all the economists agree that this will definitely cause X or Y. You can build all the models you want, but reality doesn't always cooperate with your assumptions. Think back for a minute to when tariffs were first announced. This was back in April of this year. The stock market dropped about 19% because everyone was convinced this would unleash chaos and immediate runaway inflation. And that story just didn't play out like they thought it would. A lot of this is modeling in a classroom, and it's fine, but the real world doesn't live in a spreadsheet. So if you tried to make this huge shift and said, we're going to multiply tariffs by 10 and eliminate the federal income tax, the truth is nobody. No one out there can honestly tell you how that's going to end up. It might work out great. It might be a total disaster. There's no model that can reliably predict the final outcome of a change that big. So the bottom line is, I would say that it's highly likely that more tax changes of some sort are coming down the road. Maybe not as dramatic as eliminating federal income taxes altogether, but something is likely to shift. And when those changes start affecting retirees, which they always do, I'll make sure to break it all down for you right here.